Hello. Welcome to our next chapter, that is your IND AS 37, which talks about provisions, contingent liabilities, and contingent assets. So, before we start the chapter, it is important that we understand what these different terms mean. So, first of all, starting with provision. Provision is a liability with an uncertain either timing or amount. So, you either don't know when this will happen or you don't know for how much this will happen. Say, for example, when you say provision for bad debts, because you know that there will be a provision, but I don't know how much. So therefore, you will recognize only when there is a present obligation. There is a present obligation. It can either be legal or constructive obligation. So legal is, that means something that can be enforced. Say for example, that is put in paper, something you promised. Constructive is something you have been doing over the years. Say for example, every year I have been giving 800 Maruti cars to my employees. So now this is a constructive obligation because I usually do this. So therefore, that is constructive because of any past event. Second, it is probable that outflow of resources will be required. That means there will be certain outflow of resources either in terms of money or in terms of asset. And third is reliable estimate can be made that this will happen. So basically, all three will have to be done. Only then will we be calling this as a provision. Okay. Second is your contingent liability. What is your contingent liability? Contingent liability is a possible obligation. It is a possible obligation confirmed by future events. It may not be. Provision is definitely. I just don't know when or what amount. Contingent liability, like, may happen, may not happen. Okay, so it is a possible obligation. Again, legal or constructive, past practices or published policies. It is not to be recognized in balance sheet. This will not be recognized in balance sheet. It will only be disclosed. Contingent liability will not have any effect on balance sheet except it being a disclosure. Next is a contingent asset. Contingent asset is a possible asset that arises from past events whose existence will be confirmed by future events. Recognize the asset if inflow is virtually certain. That means you are 90% sure that this will be an asset. Then it basically is not a contingent asset anymore because it's not possible. You are mostly sure. So when you are virtually certain that this has to happen, it basically becomes an asset. And if it is not virtually certain, again this will become a disclosure. Same as contingent liability, this will also become a disclosure in the books. Okay, so there is some percentages defined. So when you think that there is a likelihood of more than 95%, so for contingent liability, you will be recognizing it as a provision. If you feel that there is a 95% chance of this happening, record it as a provision. If you see 50 to 95% also recognize as a provision. So basically for contingent liability, anything 50% and above will become a provision if it is probable. That means when we say it is 50% is the rule, if we say that there is a 50% chance of it happening, recognize it as a provision. If we feel there is a chance from 5 to 50%, in this case only disclosure is required, and if there is less than 5%, then there is no requirement of disclosure itself. So up to 5% no disclosure, 5 to 50% will be disclosure, 50% and above will become a provision. Your contingent asset is a little different. You will recognize it as an asset if it is more than 95%. If it is more than 95%, recognize it as an asset. If it is 50 to 95%, then only a disclosure is required. If anything less than 50%, if it is anything less than 50%, you do not have to show it anywhere, neither in your balance sheet nor in your disclosures, nowhere, because it is an asset. We follow the concept of prudence. Therefore, when it comes to liability, 5 to 50% is written as a disclosure, but when it comes to asset, 5 to 50% is no disclosure. Less than 5% is, of course, also no disclosure. Okay, next part comes your onerous contract. Now, what is your onerous contract? Say, for example, you had a bet. Suppose, say, for example, you are say, okay, suppose suppose had a bet with Jeet. Hey, Jeet, do you think it will rain today or not? So, Jeet and Dheer have a bet whether it will rain or not. So, Dheer says that it will rain, and Jeet says that it will not rain. And whoever wins will get a ice cream of 150 rupees. Okay, whoever wins will get an ice cream of 150 rupees. Now what happens? Dheer and Jeet have also agreed to enter into an agreement that if they do not want to, if they do not want to meet this obligation, if they want to exit out of this, even after it has rained, they have an option to exit out of this by paying 100 rupees. Whoever person exits out of this contract, they will have to pay 100 rupees. In such a case, if you see, honoring the contract will cost the person 150 rupees and terminating the contract will cost the person 100 rupees. So any normal person, what would he do? Would he rather spend 150 rupees on losing, or would he rather spend 100 rupees? He will spend 100 rupees. So therefore, onerous contract is an unavoidable cost. You will have to incur some cost. You will have to incur either 100 rupees, or you will have to incur 150 rupees in form of ice cream. It will be the lower of cost of fulfilling. Cost of fulfilling over here is 150 because you have to buy an ice cream, plus any directly attributable cost. That means you will go to the market, you will spend fuel and etc etc. Or penalty due to failure to fulfill it. Penalty in this case is 100. So therefore, onerous contract says ki bro, recognize only this 100. Recognize whichever is lower, because otherwise I will do the lower part. Na? So onerous contract is when unavoidable cost of meeting the obligation is greater than the economic benefits to be received. If there is any contract, if I'm making a building, if I'm making a building with, say for example, 4 flats, there are 4 flats. Okay, there are 4 flats. I have already spent rupees 20 crores, and now I get to know that I will also have to spend an additional, to finish the entire building, to make it ready for sale. I will have to spend another 60 crores. Okay, which means the total contract cost will come to 80 crores. But if I get to know that, boss, these four flat I will be only be able to sell for 12 crores each. That means even if I make the entire building today, okay, so these 20 crores I have already put, okay, leave this. Even after fulfilling this contract, how much will I get? I will only get 48 crores out of this. And how much do I have to spend? I have to spend 60 crores more to earn only 48 crores. Why will I be doing this contract? I will not be doing this contract. So therefore, in such a case, my cost to fulfill is 60 crores. And my penalty, if I say that, boss, if I'm not doing this, I'll have to pay some penalty. Say for example, rupees 10 crore will be my penalty. I would rather pay this penalty instead of investing more 60 crores only to earn 48 crores. Therefore, your economic benefits to be received is only 48 crores. Your unavoidable cost of meeting the obligation is 60 crores. So when your unavoidable cost is higher, is much more than your economic benefits, in such a case, this becomes an onerous contract, and you have to recognize the cost of fulfilling or penalty, whichever is lower. Coming to the last part, that is your restructuring. So restructuring is a program that materially changes one, that is the scope of business. Either it changes the scope of business or the manner in which the business is conducted. So restructuring cost to be recognized as a provision. You have to recognize restructuring cost as a provision when entity has a detailed formal plan. When entity has a detailed formal plan, and that means 1 and 2 both have to be satisfied. So when entity has a detailed plan and it has raised valid expectation that it will be carrying out the restructuring, this can be done how? This can be done, say for example, they put an ad in the newspaper, or if they've told suppliers about it. So that means you're raising expectation that yes, we will be carrying out restructuring. So what will cost to be included? Any direct expenses arising from restructuring, which are both, okay, over here also both, that is necessary and not associated with ongoing activities, these have to be made as a provision. If there are any restructuring expenses, over here when I say restructuring, it is basically restructuring expenses. Something messed up now. The restructuring expenses. So you will have to make a provision for it, for all expenses which are necessary and not associated with any ongoing business activities. What all does not have to be included, that is your cost exclusion. First is retraining or relocating any continuing staff, that will not be included. Second is your marketing cost. Third is investment in new systems and distribution network. And fourth is expected future operating losses. If you see, all of this is for future. Therefore, this will not become part of your cost. And with this, we are done with this chapter, and I will see you in the next IND AS.